You're listening to Media Savvy Moms with Melody and Marilyn. Open, honest conversations about parenting and pornography. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Media Savvy Moms. Today, we are talking about how to lay that foundation with our children underneath everything that's important that we want to talk about. We have lots of tough topics on the show, masturbation and sex and pornography, and these are all tough things, and we talk a lot about the specifics of those things, but underlying all of that, we have to have a strong foundation with our kids. And we have Brett Ullman with us today to tell us a little bit about how to make that happen. He is a speaker, author, father of two. He was a teacher with the Toronto District School Board for 10 years before moving into full-time speaking back in 2005. He is now also a vlogger. He has a master's degree in evangelism and leadership from Wheaton Graduate School in Chicago, and he's also a graduate of the Arrow Leadership Program. He speaks to teens, young adults, leaders, and parents on topics including sexuality, mental health, men, dating, and media. So he's just really kind of our ally and buddy, and we're really excited to have him today. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Marilyn to interview Brett.
Thanks, Melody, and welcome, Brett.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Brett and I met a couple of years ago in Ottawa. Actually, I heard him speaking at a conference, and since then I've just really loved to have the opportunity to sit down and have a chat, just parent to parent, because Brett's got so many great ideas and really seems to get kids. And when you consider what you've done with your career, it's no wonder. So why don't we start out with that and let us know, you've spoken to high school kids for about 20 years now, you said.
I think I'm at 24. I taught for 10 years, but I was speaking through that whole time as well. And then I had to leave teaching because I was teaching full time and speaking 45 dates a year, being married with two kids, which is fully unsustainable, which I am.
Yeah, so in that time, what would you say in general? We have wonderful teens in our acquaintances, but in general, people think teens has got this tough exterior. What have you seen maybe beyond that? What is it that teens need most from us? And if you want to pull from some stories that you've had in your teaching experience, that would be great.
Sure. You know what? It's funny. Most of the things that I'm going to bring up are negative things, the growth of anxiety, all these other things, fear of being alone. But I want to start with some positive ones first. One thing I see with kids is, like, I have two teenagers. I have a grade 12 and a grade 11. And even when I travel and speak, I see good kids. I think so often, like, if you work in the youth world, so often the books that we read, it's kind of like good adults, bad kids. And that's not the reality. Like, there are great kids doing good things today. Like, not every kid's addicted to their phones. Not every kid's addicted to porn. I think we have these, sometimes you just read these books and it's all negative about teenagers.
Yeah.
And often, like, if we're talking about phones, I think we are almost worse as adults. I see more adults addicted to their phones. And so I just kind of begin with, I see good kids. And I see good kids looking for answers. They're looking to be equipped and empowered and how to live and how to do life and all these other things. And so there's good things happening, not just bad. But as someone who speaks on mental health and as someone who struggles with mental health, I see a growth in the last probably 10 to 15 years in anxiety, panic, depression, and that kind of sphere. Now, the problem with that is the question of what is the reason for that? We often just blame it on smartphones, but there's also been an incredible growth in overparenting. And so kids are now not kind of prepared for life. A lot of kids head off to college, university, and they're not even prepared for it because mom or dad have done all these things for them. And then I think too is the language has changed. So we see a lot of kids today who say they're anxious, but it's actually just they're nervous. They're nervous to go to a party alone. They're nervous to do a presentation at school. But their language now, we all kind of think everything's mental health, but it could just be they're saying they're anxious because they have to do a presentation in front of a class of people.
Yeah, and that makes you nervous. And you're saying this is somebody who does understand mental health.
It's funny. Some people have always struggled. I never did, and I I left teaching. It's called a leadership program called Arrow. You'd mentioned that in the intro. And then I went straight to a master's degree in Chicago, but I was doing too much. I was speaking 275 speaking dates a year to pay for it. And I graduated March 1st, 2012. And then within 6 to 9 months, everything kind of broke down. I began to have panic attacks on stage, stopped sleeping. And then I ended up spending almost a year of my life at home. And there's irony in my journey in that I speak on mental health. And to this day, I still struggle with panic. I still struggle with anxiety. I still don't sleep well. But I think it's, for me, just given me eyes to see more some of the struggles we have, not only as adults, but as kids as well. But anxiety is a big one. And if I had to give you another big one, I would just say this fear of being alone. I mean, it's such a big topic, the fear of being alone. Kids just want to feel connected. I mean, Allison Schaefer, I don't know if you know Allison, so she speaks on parenting. She talks about Adler parenting quite a lot, which is, kids want to feel significant and all these other things. But this idea of being alone is something
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Adler and parenting?
Adler parenting. It's Alfred Adler is the style of parenting he actually subscribes to, which I didn't know until I began researching it. People want to belong and feel significant is kind of the core. It's a lot bigger than that. But I see kids today desperately trying to fit in. And the problem is that they're trying to fit in with each other. Like there's a story to go into two styles of parenting, but another one's called attachment parenting. And there's a great author named Leonard Sachs. Now, attachment parenting isn't what most of us think. It's not breastfeeding till your kids are 6 and co-sleeping. Like that's a different conversation. But this is the idea of like our kids need to attach to us before they go attach to their peers. And the problem today is peer attachment, where kids are looking for this kind of unconditional love and acceptance from each other. And they can't give it to each other because they're each just desperate to fit in. And they will each, for the most part, dump anyone to get, to hang out with someone else who they think's on this higher on a popularity ladder. And every kid thinks everyone's different. But I just see a lot of fear of being alone. And so there's this paradox. Kids want to be connected, but they're actually disconnected. One study recently said half the kids wearing earbuds, like AirPods or whatever at school, aren't listening to anything. So they're desperate to be connected, and they're desperate and terrified of being connected, which is this weird paradox we seem to see today.
So they're using the earbuds as kind of a safety net, so they don't have to. They can have the appearance of being occupied. Is that what you're saying? I want to make sure I understand.
I kind of said that. So if you have earbuds in, people assume you're listening to music or something, so they therefore won't converse with you, have a conversation with you. So it allows you this kind of buffer between you and someone else. But in that, you're not learning how to body language and how to have conversation. And so more and more kids are becoming disconnected because of the actions that we're doing. And they desperately need to learn body language and how to, have good conversations with people.
So from all this experience of talking to teens and your interest in parenting, and I know you read tons and tons. In fact, I think I heard you say if you're not reading books that you're willing to throw across the room, you're not reading the right books, something along that line. Like you just love to have a broad base to draw from. But you yourself have written a book. It's in the works, and it's going to be titled Parenting, Navigating Everything. Is that correct?
It is. The original title was just Everything. And then I thought, how do you call a book just everything? But this was birthed out of a conversation at one of my talks. Well, it was birthed after a number of years of every time I would speak on one topic, somebody would ask me about a different topic.
Okay.
So I'd speak on mental health and somebody would come up afterwards and say, well, how do I talk to my kids about porn? And the next one, I'm having a talk on pornography, and someone says, well, how do I deal with media and phones? What age should my kids get a phone? And I realized there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but it all came kind of from one conversation with a father. And a father walked up to me after, I think it was a talk on mental health. And he said, Brett, how do I talk to my daughter about sex? Great question. And so I went to answer him, and he said, oh, wait, by the way, she hates me.
Oh dear.
And I didn't know what to say. And so I went to say, what do you mean she hates you? And he said, no, forget about that. How do I talk to her about sex? I'm like, forget about sex. What do you mean your daughter hates you? She's 16. And I kind of said to him, if you don't have a relationship with your kid, you won't be talking about sex. or pornography or anything with her.
Mm-hmm.
You need that relationship. It's such an important foundation. And I realized that I'm a topical speaker who's never addressed the foundations of parenting. And so I began to read, and I am a reader. And I actually do challenge people to read books that make you want to throw them across the room once in a while, just in that I don't want to read mirrors of me. I don't want to read a book that's just, oh, yes, this author is the exact same as me and believes in everything. I want to be challenged in what I believe as well. And so the foundation of the book is like 7 chapters on, I'm calling it the foundations of parenting, but it's not like there's only X foundations of parenting, but it's like parenting styles is a really important thing to acknowledge. We need to understand. There's a great chart I use, which is like on one axis is support and warmth. On the other axis is like control and demand. Mm-hmm. And we actually need both of those. Like if you just demand without love, you're an authoritarian parent, right? If you pound your fist on the table and say, give me this or do this. But if you ask things of your kids at the same time with loving them and equipping them, that's the authoritative parent, which is actually what we're supposed to be.
Okay.
Like my wife's a nurse, and if she's out doing home visits, she's in home care management. But if she's out doing home visits and I'm heading to speak somewhere, I'll ask my kids, can they do the dishes? Can they walk the dog? But I also love them to death. You need that kind of both things. So parenting styles, communication, time, discipline. I also talk about the progression of parenting, and you can't see my hands, but it's kind of like when kids are young, your hands are on them, and people think you're choking them. You're not, but it's just your hand. You're with them.
Making sure you don't lose them. Yeah.
And then they become middle school kids, and you slowly pull your hands back a bit. And like I have a grade 12 daughter now, and things like, you really got to start pulling your hands away. We have no curfew with her. And people say, what do you mean no curfew? It's like, she's almost 18. Like I want her before she heads away next year to university, college for my American friends. But like, I want her to know things. I want her to, come home too late and get up the next day and say, I should be coming home earlier. Like I need to fully prepare not only her, but my son as well for the idea of, heading on. There's a great quote in a book called Trophy Child, and it says, they will not be with me forever, so I will prepare them accordingly. Uh-huh. And it's the quote I use from my talk. Like, it's like, that's the goal of parenting, really, is to prepare our kids for life. And the truth is...
And to not have them hate you.
Yes. Today we seem to not be preparing our kids for life. We seem to spend all our time protecting them from life. I got that quote from a woman named Julie Lithcott-Hames on a TED Talk, but it's like, we're just protecting them, right? All the over-parenting and helicopter parenting and lawnmower parenting, kids are not prepared anymore. And so they're heading, and this is on everything, topics of pornography, topics like I'm dealing with a parent last week whose grade 5 kid was Googling what oral sex was. And the mom's, and I said, well, you've had that conversation with her. And she said, we don't even talk about sex. And well, she's now Googling what things are because she's hearing words and doesn't know. And we need to talk about those conversations.
We are so with you on that. That's for sure. That's where we live. So navigating everything, we will link to that in our show notes. Well, we will link to your website so they know when it's released, and we will put that out. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to get some examples of how to implement this in our day-to-day lives.
If you're like us, you probably spend a lot of time worrying about your kids, and especially wondering if they're safe on the digital devices and apps they're using. We have a tool that can help you. It's called the Bark app. That's Bark, B-A-R-K. Bark's logo is a little barking dog, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little dog that goes sniffing through your kids' content and looking for danger. It will monitor 24/7 all your kids' content and alert you if there's something dangerous that falls into the categories like drugs and alcohol, violence, sexual content, self-harm, profanity, weapons, or changes to their accounts. If you get an alert, then it will send you a little ping and also suggestions on how to talk to your child about the problem. We have a special 30-day trial for our listeners. You can try out the app and test drive it for 30 days. Just go in, download the app, and at checkout, use the code MEDIASAVVY.
And we're back with Brett Ullman, who is discussing with us parenting and navigating everything and really how to build a strong connection with our kids so that we can navigate all the things that are coming at our kids. And he talked in the first half a lot about anxiety and their feelings of being alone. So I was wondering, Brett, could you give us an example or two of how we as parents can really connect with our kids so that we can lift them up through when they are feeling those challenges or when they're struggling with, or before they're struggling with things like what is that, how do we create that base beyond theory, practical day-to-day stuff?
I want to first give you one thought, and then I'll give you practical examples.
Sure.
There's a curriculum called the Orange Curriculum, and in it they have this chart, and it shows on kind of one axis is what they call positional influence. And so it begins when you have young kids, you have this awesome positional influence. You know, if you have a baby and you want to leave, you pick up your baby now and you leave. But it goes down. And then you have this thing called relational influence, and it begins with nothing. And that is what grows. And it kind of shows these lines crisscrossing around grade 7 and 8. But what you want, like for me with a grade 12 and a grade 11, is this freedom that I have this relational, like I have this relationship with my kids. And so how do you get that? It is a million conversations, right? It's every time your kids walk in the room or every time they come home from school, you take your cell phone and you put it down. I was going to show you my cell phone, and I forgot we're on an audio podcast. But you put your phone down and you look each other in the eye. It means that when I'm talking to my kids and I get a phone call, I don't care. It's saying you're the priority in life. It is little things. I did a video blog on this the other week. My daughter had called and said, listen, or she texted and said, I'm so sorry. I left this form at home and I need it today. And a lot of parenting books say, teach them a lesson, hard parenting. It's like, I disagree. My daughter's a good kid and she forgot something. And so I'm like, sure. And I drove it and she was really thankful for it. But like that again is when we have a tough conversation on something, I've again built into her. Like I always say to my kids, I'm for you. I'm not against you. Like, it's not like we're parents, you're the kids.
Yeah.
Like, we're on the same team.
I was just about to say, we want to be on the same team. We want them to know that we're on their team, right?
Like talking, putting your phone down. I always say driving is really important. There's something about driving, especially with young boys, because girls I find are better conversationalists, but you're driving in a car, your son or your daughter's in the car, and people just start to talk. And if you have a car full of teenagers, it's like you don't even exist. It's just like everyone's talking and you're like, oh, I didn't know all of these things. But there's all these ways, like family dinners is another one. There's a bunch of studies from, I think it's Columbia University, that say if you eat dinner together, I think it's 3 times a week, all these bad things won't happen, like teen pregnancies, dropping out of school, drug and alcohol use and abuse. But it's not just eating together. It's not just, all sit down and shove food in your mouth. It's putting your phones away, putting them in airplane mode. It's looking each other in the eye and saying, tell me something good that happened today. Tell me something bad that happened today. And that's us being part of that as adults, because we all have good things and bad things as well.
I imagine it's being intentional about that purpose of why you're eating together, and not just going through the motions of it, to take that as your opportunity. I know I've had some pretty lousy dinners with my kids, but we've also had those gems where you just leave and you know that you've connected better. And you know that you're setting a foundation, as you say, for the tougher topics.
And it's not just the food part. It even begins with the shopping. We took my son shopping the other week and he's like, I didn't know there was so much stuff. And it's like, oh, dude, you're 16. Like, yes, in a grocery store, there's food. But it's the shopping, it's the cooking, it's the eating, it's the cleaning, right? It's all of these things put together. But to me, the communication's the biggest. Like, I know you guys talk about tough topics like pornography and sex. Like, yeah. Dinner's been this kind of open table. You can ask any question anytime you want.
Okay, so I have a question for you, because I think we'll have some listeners who will say, but my kid just won't do anything. Like, my kid will not clean up at all. They won't do it. Or my kid just won't talk to me. What do you say to that parent?
Well, for the cleaning up kind of component, It's kind of like allowance. We do allowance in my house. We did when my kids were younger, but I don't pair allowance with chores. You do chores because you eat food and you make clothes dirty and right. So you do those things. To me, allowance is teaching about money.
Hmm.
Chores are you're doing because you're part of a family. So the best thing is actually proactive with this, which is your kids, even when they're 3 and 4 years of age, like they can grab a cup and they can put water or milk in it, right? You can teach them how to do that. But it's this progression that they've always been part of that. But I think those things can be, I don't know, if formalized is the right word, but I love a term called family meetings.
Okay.
It's this idea where you sit down as a family and you go over everything you do as a family. And so
Hmm.
I have a YouTube video on this, but we would do it every August. We've done it since my kids were 9 and 8 and 7. So, I mean, they're now almost 18, almost 17. And it's become one of our favorite times of the year. So we go through, like when they're little, what Halloween costume do they want? It's
Hmm.
like, my wife doesn't want to know you want to be this elaborate thing the day before because she's better at the costumes than I am. We talk about, do they need new bikes or do they need new shoes for school? And then they get a bit older and it's kind of like, are we going to get a gym membership or what sports will you do? Because rep
So
sports.
they're not just passive people in your family. They're actively involved in. They feel like they have a say in what's going on or a voice, and it's all part of a machine, I guess, that's operating together.
If we're going to say we're a family, then we're all part of this. So it's kind of
Uh,
like, well, let's look at the next, like, it's not like one kid plays high level sports and takes all the family money and no one else can do things. How do we do things?
How do
Are
we
we
do?
going to go on a family vacation? And if we are, great. But it might mean we're going to go out for dinner less, or it might be part of your Christmas or birthday gifts. Or like even for a birthday, every year we would talk about, I mean, when the kids are little, it's different, right? When they're older, we go for a meal or something. But like, unlike when I grew up, which was like you have hot dogs and some chips and it costs you $50. Now it's like people want to go to a trampoline place or, you do all these things and it's $500, but let's walk through all those things. But even in the family meeting, it's talking about how you're going to be as a family. Well, here are chores. What do you think you should do? What do you think we should do? How can we work through these things? But I like to say there's no unwritten rules anymore. It's all just laid on the table. It's not, you didn't clean the bathroom and the kid's like, am I supposed to clean the bathroom? But like my kids are now old enough that their bathroom is their responsibility. My daughter and my son have kind of we have a master bathroom on ours out of our bedroom, but it's like they're responsible for that. And we will still equip them. We'll teach them how to do it. But at a certain point, you kind of release them and let them do it. But we've talked about these things in our family meeting.
So rather than just looking at the child that says you're not cleaning up after yourself, approach it differently and see if you can get them to take ownership of what they're able to do.
And we have to stop telling and start teaching. Like, we always tell kids what to do as opposed to teaching them how to do it. And I think that's even kind of the cornerstone of discipline, right? It's not punishment, it's teaching. If they're home late, well, why are they home late? Kids don't just come home early. Like, so how are we teaching them how to think about that? Do they have a phone? Do they, put a reminder on or an alarm at a certain time? But it's the idea of teaching things, not just expecting that they're just going to happen arbitrarily.
Great. So how does that teaching versus telling help us with those bigger topics? Now that we've got this foundation, how is that going to set the stage for when we really do have to talk to them about sex and porn and drugs and mental health, and then they don't hate us like you said at the beginning? How do we set that stage, or how does that help?
Well, so if we make an assumption, if we just, after we've been spending time, and even for some parents, it's having a family meeting and saying, I've really messed up. I've been busy. And I know I've been working too much, or I've been watching every sports, I was going to say certain sports teams, but like wherever you're at, like whatever, like for me, if it's a Toronto Raptors basketball game, I'm going to say, no, I need to turn it off and be part of life. But it's from all those things. Now we can have those hard topics. And it doesn't mean that it's easier to talk about pornography. But I have a talk I do called the sex talk, and it's kind of a play on words because there's no such thing, right? There's no one talk you have when a kid is in. I always laugh. Kid in grade 12 comes up to me at one of my talks and he says, "Hey, Brett, what are birds and bees?" And I burst out laughing and I said, "It's an old term for sex." And he said, "Oh, that makes sense." I'm like, "Tell me why are you asking? He says, well, my dad came in my room last night. He said, it's the first time my dad ever came in my room. So 18-year-old, grade 12.
Wow.
That first time that his dad came in his room is another, like, that's no relationship they have.
Uh-huh.
He sat on the edge of his bed, and this young guy said to me, Brett, my dad looked like someone died. And he says, so who died? Or are my parents getting divorced? Father said, like, son, do you know about the birds and the bees? And this kid said, I know I'm seeing you tomorrow at, I think it was at a school. And he said, so I just said to him, yes. And the dad said, oh, I'm so glad we had this conversation. And he walked out. But like the sex talks begins talking about body parts when kids are 4 and 5, and then they get older. And it's like, you know, did anyone show you, like, talking, you know, there's the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures book, which I think I saw on your site earlier, like talking, and that's not teaching kids about porn, which is what someone said once. It's just teaching them about there's a reality of life and what body parts are. And then, you know, when kids are in grade 4, 5, and 6, in my house, we actually stopped, you know, they'd come home and say, can I buy a song? And we kind of flipped it in our house.
Buy a song?
A song, like for their like phones or whatever, iPad or whatever. But rather than us as parents going and researching the song, we switched it to the kids researching the songs. So the grade 4 would open up a browser. We'd show them how to do it, type in whoever, Rihanna, plus lyrics, plus whatever song, and then the lyrics would pop up, and we would read through it. But then not us saying yes or no. The kid would choose yes or no.
Yes or no, based on what they think mom or dad would think, because they're usually doing it together. That makes total sense. And
so it's just saying it's a million little conversations.
Yeah, and I feel bad. I was laughing because it was funny, the story that you were telling us, funny and sad. But I understand that dad who didn't, you know, we think that we're supposed to wait for a certain age to have this talk, and it's so much easier if we can start it earlier.
If someone's listening and they are that father, right? They're the person who's been so disconnected. I'm gonna steal Home Depot. Like, you can build it, we can help. Like, you can do it, but we can help. Like, you can do these conversations, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, saying oral sex and blushing a bit. Like, that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I also think we have to let parents realize too, there's no such thing in the world, which is if you say things, kids will go and do it.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot. Like, oh, if you say
I've heard all to get over. Yeah.
It's like, no, it gives them knowledge where they can then make decisions on what they're doing. But it's not like you say things and they're going to rush out and do it. But it gives them knowledge. Like, my kids, when they went to school, knew what things were. And so when kids were talking about, I think it was my daughter once was saying all her friends were talking about who they've had sex with. And my daughter's like, they didn't even know what it means. Like, but our daughter did, because we'd had conversations on it. Okay. Awkward conversations still, but yeah. Okay,
so we've talked a lot of positive things, but I know we started with what teens are, what their biggest concerns are. So I kind of want to leave on a positive note with what is your favorite part of having parented through the digital age?
That's a good question. See, what's interesting to me is my kids have gotten older in the digital age, and I've enjoyed my kids getting older. I love teenagers. I did not enjoy, and it sounds horrible, I did not enjoy baby stage. My daughter Zoe did not sleep through the night till she was 2.5, and it was brutal. I mean, sleep deprivation, which I still now struggle with in a different way, but it's hard. But I love the quick connection. Like, I told this story a minute ago, like, my daughter texted me she needs a form, but I love that. Like, this whole thing happened within 10 minutes. Like, years ago it would have been having to call, and then you might not get the phone, and now it's direct and it's instant. The digital age too gives me freedom a bit in that now that my kids are older, because I struggle with some mental health, I go to bed and I don't sleep well. So I go to bed about 10:30 every night. Well, my teenagers go out at 10 or 10:30. And so how do you have things like, well, if you need a ride home, call me when you're actually in bed. And so digital technologies really helped us. So my kids both have the Uber and the Lyft app on their phone, and with my credit card, and they can get a taxi home basically whenever they want. I also just think, to answer, like, the bigger thing with your question is the world is at our fingertips. Like, the digital stuff has helped us as parents. There's so many parenting resources. There's so many blogs and vlogs, like video blogs, and like just podcasts, and great places to get, you know, advice on parenting, leadership, and any other aspect you want to get better at in life. It's just kind of right there for you at any moment.
Great. All right, we're going to turn the podcast back to Melody, and then we'll come back for your challenge in just a minute.
All right. As I've been listening, here are some of the highlights that have stood out to me. I love how at the beginning you talked about how we have this stereotype of good adults, bad kids, and how that's a stereotype. How we really do have good kids, and they're looking for answers, and it's great for us to be there for them. We talked about how there's this issue of connection going on, and we need to be aware of it, that our kids in this digital age are at the same time wanting to be connected, but also terrified of being connected. So as parents, that we need to be aware of that and be available for that. We also heard you talk about building accountability, and that is so important. And I loved the quote halfway through that you recited for us from Ted Cunningham, the trophy child. They will not be with me forever, so I will prepare them accordingly. It's great advice for us as parents. Then we had a great dialogue about how it's not just one or two things that we do with our kids to build these connections and lay these foundations. It's a million different conversations with our kids. Making them priority, putting down the phone, having eye contact, being on the same team. There are just such great pointers as we were going through, and using family experiences and work to bond together is a great way. We talk a lot on our show about having these conversations shoulder to shoulder as we're working together, and you're just right on target with us that way. And I love also your advice to stop telling and start teaching. Also very powerful advice. So, all right, go ahead and move on to the challenge.
I need to give you 2 action items. And for each of these, just do them. No matter how good it is, it's not going to be great. Good it is that good language? You know what I mean? No matter how good it goes or whatever. The first is eat together. And forget if it's just dinners. Like, I don't care if you're eating at a coffee shop or for dinner as a family after rep gymnastics or after whatever, but try to eat together as much as you can. And sometimes it's weekends, after, something at school. But anyways, eat together. And then the second one would be is have a family meeting. And it might be something you just plan. Again, I have a video on this, just gives you some headings, but it's just talk about whatever you want to. And it's just kind of saying, we're going to try to be a family, a better family. Here's how we're going to support each other in this. And I think if you start, our first family meeting was a bit of a disaster, but it gets better. And it's one of those things, just start. So eat together as a family and start family meetings and see how those things go as they kind of compound over time and get better and better as you keep doing them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brett.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, remember to subscribe. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, or email us directly at mediasavvymoms@gmail.com. We'd love to get your feedback.